Hi, Brazen Nation. This is the Brazen Asian podcast. I'm your co-host, Stella.
And I'm your other co host, Virginia Dwan, also known as Mandarin Mama. I'm the entertainment editor for Mochi Magazine, the longest running Asian American women's magazine online. I'm also a freelance writer as well as an author of two novels. I feel like messy people, angst, found families, stories about recovering from trauma, sexy times, all set in the backdrop of K pop. You might enjoy my books. They're called Elusive and Weightless, so check them out.
Today, we're talking about taking risks and our complicated feelings about it.
Dun dun dun.
They say that eldest children tend to be the most risk averse.
It's so true.
Do you feel like that's true?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I didn't even ever think about it until my oldest started preschool. And because I feel like I've made risky decisions all my life. So I was just like, what is this? Eldest children don't make risky decisions. But then I met my oldest son and the preschool teacher at the time, this was like 12 years ago, and she said that every time they did a new activity, she could always tell who was the eldest because my son would hold back, observe everyone. I mean, it could be like playing a game or doing hopscotch or something fun. It's not even a scary thing. And he would observe them do the activity maybe two or three times and then he would play it. But he would never be like, let's go do that. He would have to like watch people first and then do it. And it's really interesting.
Yeah, I would say that tracks true for us too. Like
Yeah.
my oldest is risk averse. I'm the oldest child. I'm risk averse. My husband's the oldest child, and he's also, I wouldn't say he's the most risk averse of his siblings, but he kind of is. He
Mm,
kind of is. Like, yeah, we calculate a lot of things in our
yeah.
household.
But it's funny because I feel like my husband's the youngest of three and I'm the oldest. And I would say I'm way more risk. I'm
Taking.
way, yeah, I take more risks than he does. But I also really hate instability, if that makes sense. So our biggest fights in the last 10 years were always related to instability. Like if he wanted to quit his job, that would start a fight because I'd be like, we have four children. What are you doing? And he's like, why do you want me to be? So in certain instances, when he is taking risks, I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? But I feel like day to day, I'm much riskier than he is. But I don't know if it's because I have that foundation of his stability. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Like you know that there's something to fall back on, so it's not as risky a thing as
Right.
someone who doesn't have a safety net.
Right.
Do you feel like you're more risk averse than your sibling?
Well, he runs his own consulting company to the government. So, yes, I am probably way more risk averse than he is.
And so maybe it's what is the word I'm thinking of?
Relative.
Yeah, maybe it's relative to
Double
families,
pun.
right?
Double pun
Ah!
intended.
Terrible.
I know. I'm sorry. Not sorry. So, yeah, maybe. But part of me wonders now because my brother is also ADHD. We highly suspect my father was. And we've just discovered that I am. So, like, how much of the risk taking that done was just actually poor decision, like impulsivity, the inability to rein in my mouth.
Yeah, I mean, reining in your impulsivity with ADHD is really, really hard. As someone who has it, I feel like I've paid the price many
Oh,
times over.
a hundred
Like when I
percent.
start a new hobby, and the
Gosh,
lesson that people keep telling me is like, take the class, don't buy the supplies.
ridiculous.
But it's this idea like, don't jump in with both feet thinking that this will be a sustainable hobby for you. If it's something you're interested in, try it out with the class, like make a smaller commitment. But my impulsivity is just like, no, I want all this. I want all the things.
Yeah. What do you mean? I don't need every single size knitting needle and crochet needle ever, ever.
Yeah. And sometimes if you have ADHD, you lose said things. And so you buy them a few times over.
Oh,
LOL, sob.
let's not talk about this anymore. This still just makes me sad.
So I guess we should open up by talking about things that we've either done or haven't done because of risk management.
Oh, oh.
Like, I don't think I've made any risky decisions. Except I have. There are some things where I'm like, oh yeah, no, I was taking a risk there. But mostly I'm like, no, I'm very boring. Nothing risky.
Boring, I don't think risk is the opposite of boring, right? Like cautious is the opposite of risk. Interesting is the opposite of boring, right? Like that's so interesting that you say it that way.
No, I think what's funny about it though is that I guess because I find myself to be pretty risk averse, I think that I don't take opportunities,
Oh,
right? Where I'm like, oh, I don't think I want to do that.
so can you like give an example that you're comfortable with sharing?
I mean, even meeting new people, doing new things, I'm kind of like,
Mm.
no, I don't really need to do that. So sometimes if my friends are inviting us out to new places, like somebody in the
Oh,
group will be like, hey, so this is a really good place to park. Or when you go in, make sure you go up to the counter. We are all kind of in this place where we feel a little bit more comfortable if we know what's going to happen when we get to a new place,
oh.
which I kind of love. Like I love that a lot of people in my life are like, yeah, here's the general vibe. Here's what you'll probably want to see or watch out for.
Mm. How much of that is introversion and anxiety, though?
I mean, quite a few people in these groups are extroverts. I think they just realize that I'm a really anxious person. So they're like, let me care for you a little.
That's sweet, though. That's very
Right?
sweet.
Oh, and I wonder if some of this is also because of my executive functioning, where I'm like, I don't want to commit more executive functioning to figuring out what to do in a new space. And
Mm.
so that's maybe why I won't take the risk. Like that's my calculation. It's like,
Mm.
oh, that's going to maybe take more executive functioning than I have. In fact, I'm so leery of going out and doing things that sometimes the rule that my household has in place is if I'm meeting up with someone or
Hmm.
going to an event, I have to get completely ready to go before I decide to back out.
Interesting.
Yeah, because then it's like, oh, is it that I actually don't feel comfortable going or like I don't want to go through the process of having to get ready and then having to leave the house, having to drive. There's just a lot of things there. And so, one way sometimes that we overcome that is for you have to get ready, completely ready to get out the door and go before you decide this isn't something you want to do.
Mm. That's so interesting because I also hate doing those things, especially since that a lot of events I sometimes say yes to are in San Francisco, and nothing is shittier than going to San Francisco, especially at night. I'm glad I go. That not every time, but the majority of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think I end up going even when I don't want to go because I have a high sense of obligation, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I hate flaky people and I don't want to be a flaky person. I might be a little
Yeah.
bit late, but I'll tell you I'm going to be late, but I hate people who flake because it erodes trust and also kind of screw other people over.
Mm.
Especially like some places have minimums for
Oh,
like
yeah. Fair.
reservations,
Right.
right?
Right.
And you're just like, well, you just fucked us kind of things. So I very rarely cancel. And if I cancel, I usually cancel far enough ahead of time so people don't feel bad, if that makes sense. As someone who has also planned events, it's so anxiety inducing because you're like, oh, what if no one shows up?
Mm. Hmm. Hmm.
And yeah, and I just don't want to be that person to cause someone else anxiety.
Yeah.
It's funny how we each cope with how to be at
Right.
some place, right?
But there's riskier things that we've done or chosen not to do
Mm.
other than leaving our houses. Like for me, I'm like, oh yes, risky behavior, leaving my house. But and it's kind of funny when we were talking about doing this episode, you mentioned me getting married this early.
Yeah.
It seems like a really risky thing to do. And I don't remember it feeling that way when we chose to do it.
So for context, everyone, Stella got married at like 5. No, I'm just kidding. That would be illegal. She got married really young, like before you graduated college or right after.
Before.
Yeah.
Because I took the last 2 quarters off to plan our wedding and then finished after.
That's
I know my parents were like, "What is happening?" I honestly was like, maybe I just don't want to finish college. And my parents and my husband were like, "You have 6 classes left. Please just finish your degree." So my husband and I started dating when I was 21.
Oh,
Yeah. And we got engaged basically 6 months after we started dating. But he knew I would say yes when he asked. Because I was like, I'm not going to date somebody I don't see myself potentially marrying.
okay.
I
Yeah.
was just like, there's just no point. And the other thing that really shocks people is they're like, well, did you date a lot of people before this? And I'm like, no, he's actually the first boyfriend I had in college. And
Oh,
I stopped dating my sophomore year of high school.
isn't that when most people start dating?
Yeah, that's when I
So-
stopped.
Sorry, Stella.
I know people are like, so you stopped dating at like 16? Met a man, and I met him when I was probably 19 or 20.
Mm.
Met a dude, started dating him when I was 21, and then a year later we were married.
Okay, well, it's not as bad when you clarify and give context that you knew him prior to dating him. It's
Yeah.
not like you met a stranger and then
I mean,
six
which people
months
do,
later,
right? Like, which people do.
which I would never.
And like, we didn't live together before we were married. So, a lot of people, particularly, so we were very young evangelicals at the time, but
Mm,
people who are not evangelical who are in my life are like, what the fuck is going on? I remember his family being really shocked. I think his brothers were really surprised.
mhm.
They're like, why would you marry someone before you've lived together for a while and been together for some time?
Right. What if you're incredibly incompatible in multiple ways?
Yeah, right. So it was a huge risk. I just didn't feel like it was at the time.
Yeah. I mean, marriage is super risky. Like, not just your physical body, but your finances, credit score, children, you
Yeah, I was
know,
gonna say, yeah, yeah.
like it just compounds so many things.
And women are typically at a major disadvantage
Yes.
when leaving a marriage. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And my parents were like, if it doesn't work out, you can always come home.
Oh.
And at the time I was like, that's very sweet, but like, do you think this isn't gonna work out? But now that I'm like 20 years in, I'm like, oh yes, I see why they were trying so hard to let me know that
Hmm.
there's always a place I could come back to in case I needed it.
Oh, I want to cry.
Oh.
That's sweet. I feel like too many parents just say,
Yeah.
you fucked around. Now you find out. Sorry.
I know, right? It's so sad. I'm really glad that both my parents and my in-laws are definitely the kind of people to be like, you can always come back home.
Yeah. I hope that's the type of parent my children experience. Just because
I
I want
mean,
to be
I
that doesn't mean that that's what they experience.
no, I'm sure your children know that if anything goes wrong, they can come back home. It's interesting that I didn't think of it as risky at the time.
Hmm.
And now that I'm like, oh, yes, I would not watch someone else do that and feel like it was a good idea. But are there places in your life where you feel like everyone else is like, oh, this is kind of risky? And you're like, no, no, I've calculated it. It'll be fine.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like anytime someone says, "Oh, you're so brave for doing that," and people say that to me a lot about the topics that I talk about or write
Hmm.
about, even publishing books and stuff. They're like, "Oh, that's so risky. You're so emotionally risky, right? Or you're opening up
Mm.
yourself up to risk from the internet. I've been doxxed. I've gotten my fair share of hate and death threats and rape threats and
Yeah. For those who don't know, Virginia has a lot of haters. They really don't like the fact that she speaks her mind. So people are telling you this feels really brave, really risky.
yeah, but I don't see it as that. I kind of overshare. The things that I feel vulnerable about, I don't talk about. So you wouldn't know because I wouldn't talk about it. And people are like, "Oh, it's so risky to change your career or to do this." And I'm like, "How is it risky? My husband works full time, has a good job, and can pay for everything. What's the risk here?" And so a lot of times people are like, "Oh, I wish I was brave like you, or I wish I was as much of a risk taker as you." And I was like, "You're in a completely different financial situation or parenting situation. Like, you cannot compare my easy life to your hard one. Like, that's not fair to them at all. I would never do something that would hurt us financially because I love money, everyone. I love money. And by I love money, I mean I love financial stability. And also I love merch. So the way to get those things is to love money. Okay.
So Chinese.
It is. It is.
So Chinese.
So I don't consider risky because it doesn't really hurt us.
But I bet a lot of people would say choosing to be a housewife or a stay-at-home mom in today's climate is a really risky thing.
Oh, yeah.
When,
So
yeah, like
stupid.
when I talk to some women who have planned their careers really carefully
Hmm.
and have planned for financial independence regardless of their marital status, they're
Yeah.
like, why would you risk this? So they ask me questions like, do you have a separate 401k? Do you guys have life insurance? Like, what are you going to do? Because they're so concerned that I'm taking this
Oh,
massive financial risk. And they're
hmm.
right, I am. It doesn't
Hmm.
feel risky. But I think a lot of people would say that a situation they're in doesn't feel risky or problematic to them at the moment. And
Hmm.
everyone else around them is like, oh, this is a bad idea.
So this is where, even though I hated my job as a financial advisor, my job as a financial advisor was very useful because I always made sure I maxed out my 401ks. I have my own investment accounts. At least in California, whatever you had prior to getting married, as long as you keep them always separate and you don't commingle funds, in a
They
divorce,
stay
they
yours.
stay
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah.
Any inheritance is yours as long as you don't commingle. That's the key, right? And so, because of that, and because I knew I was financially vulnerable, I make sure we max out. Also, my husband, I want him to max it out too, because
Yeah.
should we get a divorce, I want half. And I'm entitled to half, right? So, we max out all our retirement stuff. I make sure that I have a lot of insurance on him because I know that if something happened to him, I don't want to marry the first gross rich white guy to come along to get me out of the situation because I have a lifestyle to which I'm accustomed. So I'm like, yeah, this is the amount. We also have a policy on me because I provide a lot of unpaid labor.
Yeah.
So if I died, then he would have to pay for childcare because he has to work. For the longest time, I was in charge of all our finances. In that sense, I've tried to mitigate as much risk as possible in terms of money. But that, of course, you can't really mitigate the risk of not working for 15 years.
Yeah. The gap in my resume is significant.
I mean, you could fudge it, right? Like you said, you could be a teacher for X amount of years.
I mean, you can play pretty fast and loose with a lot
Yeah.
of things. So why people's LinkedIn profiles look the way they do.
Oh my God. It's ridiculous. If you think about it, though, us getting pregnant so many times and carrying them to term, that was pretty fucking risky. That's probably
Oh,
the
yeah.
riskiest thing to our health. Prior to me having children, I thought pregnancy was a health neutral event. I thought,
Right. Eventually you go back to your state before you were pregnant.
yeah, like it's like a blip. You know, it's like having a cold, but for like 9 months.
Inaccurate, friends.
It's not true. It's not true at all.
No. And there's a lot of evidence that pregnancy changes your brain permanently.
I think it snips certain things in your brain. So you do actually lose gray matter, I guess, or something. But the reason is so that you can focus on a tiny human and read cues or
It was
whatever.
ineffective in my case. They needed to snip a lot more gray matter because I'm like, I'm really bad at coping with tiny humans. But yes, I would say my third pregnancy was by far my riskiest. Although my first two are also somewhat risky. Like
Mm.
I was on bed rest with my second
Oh gosh, how
for
did you
eight,
do that
like
with a toddler?
I don't remember. I think I was in bed a lot and my oldest would just bring toys and books to me and we would hang out.
Oh.
Yeah. But also my oldest was a pretty easy toddler. My
Mhm.
youngest is a very like I would not be able to be on bed rest with this toddler.
Yeah. They get more feral
They do.
the more children you have. But yeah, I would say probably the hugest risk I ever took was have 5 children.
You're rolling the dice every time.
Yeah.
And I guess that's something that people worry about a lot Like, should I have kids? Should I have more kids? I've always said to my husband, what if we roll the dice and this one turns out to be an asshole? Like, I'd rather not risk it. But yes, having children, massive risk. Marrying early and not achieving financial independence before getting married, like in my case, big risk.
I mean, it's difficult to achieve financial independence if you get married so early, right? Because most of us don't accrue. That's like your lowest earning years, right? Your peak earning years are what, 40s?
Yeah, I'm missing out on those too.
Yeah, well, same.
Are there any risks you wish you had taken or that you are hoping to take in the future?
So every time I say this, people are appalled. But I really wish I was sluttier. Not to slut shame, but I really wish that I had taken more risks in that sense.
You
In
missed
my,
out on having a thought phase.
in retrospect, probably better. But I feel like I was more regretful about this 5 or 6 years ago.
Mm.
I'm less regretting it now, but only because I think I'm so tired.
Children will do that to you, particularly
Right.
young ones.
Yeah. And I'm just like, well, sex, men just really aren't that great.
So yeah, I guess you wouldn't want to.
Yeah. 5 or 6 years ago, that was one of my hugest regrets. Like, I should have just been more of a hoe. And I realize that can be risky behavior. So a lot of it is also because, like, when I'm plotting novels, I'm just like, how do you make sure you're safe? If you go to their house, you know what I mean? What if they
Keep a
hurt you?
taser on you.
Right? But if you're at your house, then they make your home unsafe.
This is why people meet at hotels, right?
Oh God. But then that's so much, that's financially stupid. And then I have a bed at home. If it was just me as a young adult, not knowing, not having the perspective I have now, I regret not doing it that way. Like, I regret not being more adventurous. But as a middle-aged person now, and I think of all the risks that involves, and maybe dating is just different now than it was, but I don't know if it's that different.
I don't think we'd survive internet dating. Babe,
Oh,
I don't think we'd survive dating apps.
no,
No.
no. I'm not saying that I couldn't pull people just from pictures, but I have 5 children. I really feel like that is a big negative.
Yes, and in your case, it would be men that you would have to deal with.
Oh,
Whereas in my case,
oh,
I
true.
think I think straight men would be like the bottom of my list. We
It's
joke all the
true.
time. My husband and I joke all the time that he was cis straight men's last shot with me. I'm glad I picked a good one. I'm glad I picked a good one.
Yeah.
If
No,
he
he's
was going
great.
to be the last one that I
Yeah. So I think if this question was like 5 or 6 years ago, that would be my like biggest regret. But now men have just degraded.
why are
This is,
men?
yeah, I don't want to
Apologies to men, but
like,
also why are you guys like this?
yeah, like obviously I know plenty of good men that
Same, same.
are, I wouldn't be friends with them if they were not, right? And I'd like to think the majority of men are not this way, but
When the bar is in hell and all the men are just ordering whiskey shots, it means that men don't have any incentive to do more than just clear the bar,
yes.
right?
Yeah. So that's why I would say that is no longer something I regret.
That's interesting. When I think about things I could potentially regret, I realize I would have to have been a different person back then in
Hmm.
order to take those risks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes people ask, oh, do you regret not dating women, before you got married? Or like, what do you think would be different? And I'm like, I would have to have been a different person. I would have to have known things about myself at a
Hmm.
really early age
Yeah.
because I got married so young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have had completely different parents,
Right. Right.
like a non-abusive father. That's what I would have had to have.
LOL sob.
Yeah, right.
I'm thinking about risks that I regret not taking.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people would probably put stuff like not being adventurous, not traveling more, not
Hmm.
spending more time with people or whatever it is. But I'm
Hmm.
like, I would have to have been a different person to have made different choices.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think I could have been anybody else.
Right. Now that we're talking about this, I do regret I wasn't more transactional.
Ooh.
And I don't mean it in a like shitty way, even though it sounds shitty. I really regret minimizing myself.
Oh. Oh, that's a good one.
And it doesn't sound like that's a risky thing, but it is because if I talked about myself the way my friends or people who believe in me talked about myself, I would be so afraid, which a lot of people find surprising. But I think part of me, it's like how it took a long time for me to say I'm a writer,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
it took a long time for me to say I'm the entertainment editor for Mochi magazine.
Mm-hmm.
Because all I could think was that people would be like, oh, well, you're just a volunteer. Or, oh, well, you're really actually just a stay at home mom.
Which
You're
is inaccurate. You are writing. You are the entertainment editor. Those
right,
are legitimate facts.
right, right. And also, I am also a stay at home mom, right?
Yes,
But
correct.
I think I was just afraid of naming what I was because it didn't match how I felt inside.
Mm.
And so I allowed people to dismiss me
Hmm.
because I wasn't useful to them,
Right, right.
because I didn't have the power or access. But I actually do have a lot of access and power. I have a pretty big network, and people repeatedly say, I can't believe you know this person, or I can't believe you know so many people, or oh, you know everyone, which I don't, is a function of being old and having jobs in multiple industries, right? Like 5 or 6 industries and
But
age,
also
right?
being an extrovert.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that's what I regret. I regret not
Not
accepting.
believing in your own hype.
Yeah,
Because you kind of should have, right? Like,
right.
yeah. I still don't believe in my own hype. So I guess that's a regret I could have. I joke a lot about that I fly under the banner of aggressive mediocrity. Because the reality is, if you keep people's expectations really low,
Hmm.
it's hard to fail them.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And so I
Yes.
am forever keeping everybody's expectations really low.
I mean, it's good to temper people's expectations,
Right.
but this last year or two, I think I always saw it as transactional, but now I see it as connecting people I care about to each other.
Mm.
And I think part of it is it just took time for me to grow, to get settled with a descriptor. Like, oh, it's been like 6 or 7 years. So I'm used to it now, right? I've said it enough that it kind of doesn't feel stupid.
Yeah, like you've pushed back the imposter syndrome enough that it's sunk in, maybe.
Yeah. I've also done enough so it doesn't feel impostery. I guess the risk here is all perceived, right? It's not actual risk. You know, the risk that someone's going to say, like, actually, you really don't belong here.
And what's
Or,
wild is if that actually happened, you might just say fuck you.
I don't know. I don't know if I actually am that spicy confrontational in person.
You know, I would say I'm absolutely not. And I would think that a lot of people who know me in person would disagree with me.
Okay, so maybe, I don't know. But the whole reason why we got started on this topic was because you were mentioning something about your fear of regret is not more than your fear of failure. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
So when we started talking about this episode, and I joked with you that right now I am not taking risks creatively, honestly.
Hmm.
And we recently did our episode with GKO, and
Hmm.
he's taken some really big creative risks and job risks,
Hmm.
in the past 5 or 10 years. And you and I both know a lot of people who are putting themselves out there. It's this risky
Yeah.
endeavor of putting your art out there and doing what you love and all
Hmm.
of these things. And so I started asking myself in my mind, like, what is stopping me from doing any of these things?
Hmm.
And the conclusion I came to is that currently my fear of regret is not larger than my fear of failure or fear of risk taking.
Hmm.
Because people ask all the time, Like, what are you waiting on? I think you asked me this too. Like, what are
Did
you
I?
waiting on? Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No, and it's never meant like with an ill intention.
Mm.
But I do think that people in my life are like, you could do so much more than you are right now. And I get it. I get why they're saying what they are.
Hmm.
And honestly, I think the real conclusion is I'm more afraid of investing time and it not being worth it than I am afraid of regretting not taking the chance. For now, I'm sure eventually
Yeah.
the scale will shift and I will become more scared that I'm losing out on something.
Mm.
But the other thing that comes to mind is the fact that it shouldn't matter if I'm investing time and it doesn't pan out the way that I want,
Yes.
because maybe I'll discover something else while I'm working on it,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Like art doesn't have to be good in order to be made.
True. That explains
Yeah.
so much of what my children make.
Right? Like sometimes just creating things is the important part. Sometimes it's the
Yes.
process. And honestly, no, I don't know if I want to say this, but honestly, I probably have a better shot than a lot of other people who want to do something like write full time.
It's true.
Yeah.
You should totally say that because it's true. So, several thoughts
Mm, mm.
if you're open to them.
Oh, yeah. No, we love it.
So, I feel like a huge shift in my thinking about this kind of stuff happened in my early 20s from a Cosmo article of all things. I know, but it's so formative. And I think I used to be a very jealous person. I'd be
Mm,
like, I have a better voice than this person. I'm smarter than this person. How come they get chosen for solos? Even though I have also been chosen for solos, but how come they got chosen, but I did not? Or how come, yeah. So, and I realized after this article that, okay, if I'm jealous, it's probably because I want something that they have.
mm.
Right. And so if I want something that they have, I have several options. One is I can keep being jealous, which is not a good feeling. If you've ever been jealous of someone, you just feel kind of shitty. And I don't want to be a hateful person. I don't want to be a hater for no reason, right?
Yeah.
I don't mind hating people because they deserve to be hated. But just because someone is a good singer and I didn't get chosen is not a good reason, I feel, to hate somebody. If they were also an asshole, sure, good reason. And so then I have a choice. If I don't want to be jealous, I can go after what I am jealous about. I can let it go. And if I go after what I want and I'm worried about failure, several things can happen. One, I go after it or I learn more about how to get it. And I think, actually, that sounds terrible,
I don't want this anymore.
right? Like, yeah, it's really cool to be a fighter pilot, but I don't actually want to be responsible for this machine in the air. And then if I find out that I don't want it after all, that's fantastic because
Yeah.
now I don't have to be jealous. I can be happy for this person. And two, I can let it go. But if I find that after I read all this stuff or do research that I still want it, I can either say, do I want it enough to do these things? Do I want it enough to do it later? Or do I want it enough to do it now? And then if I do it now and then I find out while doing it that I don't want to do it or I suck at it and I'm not willing to suck until I get good, then that's also useful and helpful to me because again, I can let it go. There's so many things in the world that you can go after. It's great to just know that door is closed. I don't want that. But then what if in the process, as I'm chasing this thing, I get good at it or I really like it and I get better at it?
And
And
then you
then,
publish two books.
right. And so then now I have what I was jealous about another person, but now it's mine. So it's been 20 something years since then. But I feel like that has changed my approach in life. Do I apply it well equally in all areas of my life? No, but I feel it has helped in the risk taking department that people perceive as risky.
It seems like we're talking a little bit more about regrets in some ways than just
Mm.
risk taking because I feel like they're kind of paired, right?
Yeah, because I feel like risk implies investment.
And some people don't do things without like an ROI, like a return on investment.
Mm, I guess I'm not really a huge risk taker, so all the risks that I do take are calculated that way.
I mean, I think that's also the place I land in where I'm like, I'm not completely risk averse. I just want to know what's the math. And
Right.
it's great. I married a math guy, so it's great. We can sit down and quantify a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it's good to talk about small risks.
Mm.
Like to me, it feels like a small risk, but I guess when I was doing it, it felt like a big risk. But even like I went to this art seminar thing called like the Dream State a few weeks ago. And part of the program was they made us do grounding exercises, like breathing and meditation types of things, which I despise.
Could be the ADHD.
Like, yeah, I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, why did we spend 20 minutes breathing? I breathe every day,
All day long.
all day
You
long,
breathe in your sleep. I
right?
mean,
Or like they did improv exercises, like, and so my friend Jeff Harry, he does all these play exercises, and I despise them, but I do them because I love him. So if I go to support him, I will do it, but I hate it the entire time. And so those feel like risk. I hate play in that sense of that's the type of play I do not enjoy because I feel stupid. And I feel like it's those little risks of feeling stupid that kind of slowly change you to the life you want.
agree. I think sometimes the risk is in trying new things. And they say it's really important for us as humans to keep trying new things.
Oh, like brain elasticity.
Yeah. Keep
Mm.
trying new things, keep learning new things, keep reminding yourself that the world is so much bigger and that there is a risk. There is a risk in investing time or money or feeling stupid, trying something new, being bad at it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it means that maybe you become a little less afraid
Mm-hmm.
of new
Mm-hmm.
things.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
reminds me of what Ophelia said on her episode with us about why she's taking the painting class, right?
hmm
Like,
hmm When I
go.
think about what people's top regrets probably are as they get older, I imagine it's stuff like not spending time with loved ones or not
Mm,
traveling, not experiencing the world. And I think there is a really big part of us as people that really desires to connect in a meaningful way, whether that's through making something or traveling,
mm-hmm.
making time to be with friends and family, whatever it is. And so maybe it's good for me to take more risks to invest time into those things.
Yeah. But
Because I'm not taking other risks. Like, I'm not going bungee jumping.
oh no,
I will not
gosh.
be jumping out of a plane anytime soon.
No.
Like, I'm not a thrill seeker.
No. I used to be
I'm
though.
not a thrill seeker.
I used to be, and then I had a child. And then I was like, guess I'm not doing that anymore. But you took a big risk doing this podcast with us though.
Yes, and I'm convinced that like the only reason this happened was because you were like, but we'll waste the hours.
I know.
And I was like, oh no, we can't do that.
I
And
out I out Asianed you.
you did. And I've always wanted a podcast,
I know.
right? But I was like, I'm not going to do that alone. And I was like, well, Virginia and I could talk forever about anything. So,
Exactly.
and we know so many people.
We do.
We
We
do.
do. And so I feel like you've taken risks that way, you
And
know?
it's been so rewarding.
Yay, it's been so great for me.
Yeah. So there's some evidence that like there's risks and you can get regrets or rewards. Sometimes it's both.
Yes. Yes.
Like having children is a huge risk. There
Mm.
is a huge reward, but there's sometimes regrets too, right?
For me personally, I'm not saying every person who has a child does not experience this, but I don't regret people. I don't regret them as people,
Yeah.
right?
I don't
But I
regret having my kids.
right. But I do regret opportunity costs, right? The
Right.
costs of that. Yeah. Oh, I guess it was risky for me to get diagnosed for ADHD.
I was gonna say there's also like that's also something new because for the entire first season we were like ADHD adjacent because you did put in some research, you did put in some time into trying to figure out if you had ADHD or not, and it just didn't feel like it fit for a long time.
Mm-mm. I think I know so many people with ADHD.
Birds of a feather, I'm telling
Right.
you.
I guess. I
It's how
guess.
I realized I was queer.
I love how long time listeners are like, there they go again. They should
I
take a
know,
shot
right?
every time we reference these things.
Anytime Stella rants about capitalism, take a shot.
There you go.
You know what? To tie
Mm.
it in, though, to
Oh,
tie in capitalism, I
mm.
do think that there is a part of our cultural understanding about risk that is kind of fixated on this idea of productivity.
Oh,
And I definitely experience it. Do I want to invest time into like trying to write things only for it to not go anywhere?
oh, yeah, yeah.
Which is silly, right? Because I'm not writing these things for it to go anywhere. I'm writing it because I feel like writing.
Yeah. And also, it's nice to be. I think it's because the financial reward is symbolic of people wanting your work,
That's a good
right?
point. A good point.
You know, because you don't, yes, I mean, I create art for myself. Yes, but also no.
Okay, but who wouldn't want Brandon Sanderson's career?
Right.
Didn't that man like break Kickstarter?
I think yeah, he did. Yeah.
So to
Uh,
sum it up, we think people should take risks, just not really risky ones.
I feel like there's a difference between recklessness, calculated risks, right?
True,
And
true.
some risks feel bigger than they are, like starting a podcast. And some
Yeah,
risks we minimize, like childbearing, having children, raising children, being a woman, being a stay-at-home mom, getting married, like all these, like,
at 22.
right, or at all. A lot of it is just perspective. I feel like risk and how we see it is influenced by how individualistic or collectivist our perspective is.
I think that's so true. It's
Mm.
heavily impacted by what you've been taught to believe about what's worth risking, what's
Hmm.
worth doing, what's important.
Yeah. And I wonder sometimes whether it's our Asian American collectivist background of us not taking risks on ourselves like that.
And that we don't have a lot of models for it in
Hmm.
mainstream media. Our
Hmm.
stories are not front and center, our
Hmm.
narratives are not told. And so it makes sense that we don't see that a lot. And a lot of us, not all of us, but certainly a lot of us are the children of immigrants. And that's a different kind of calculus, like what you can risk as someone who's immigrating to another country is a very different thing.
Hmm. And that's what's so hilarious to me. I feel like, oh, a lot of our immigrant parents are really risk averse, but they took a huge fucking risk to leave
I,
everything they knew to a whole fucking different country, maybe in a language that they do not speak very well, and then to have the audacity to tell us not to take a risk. But but
well,
it's sort of like,
they used up all their risk.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it's like I made this huge risk so that you could have a bit better life, so you better not fuck up my risk with your risks.
Which is like fair, but also not.
Right? Anyway.
I will say, as a woman, I do think I have a much better time as an American than I would
Oh,
have as a Korean, especially at my age.
yeah. Yeah.
Korea has a lot of things going for it, but the sexism there is wild.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I would even say in Taiwan too, but
All of East Asia. All of East Asia.
yeah.
Probably all of Asia, honestly, but
Mm.
I would say specifically East Asia.
I will say that the West, or at least in America, gives you the perception that women are freer, but it's really just, I mean, yes and no.
Freedom is an illusion, right? This
Mm.
idea that any of us are actually free is an illusion, in my opinion.
Like sometimes I feel like it's more frustrating to be a woman in America in one sense because there's so much
Because you
lip service and you expect it, but it's actually no, that's not
right,
true.
like you can really see the glass ceiling, like you're right up against it. I have a friend who jokes that she hates being in second place more than third because if you're in second, you know how close you were to first. Whereas in
Oh,
third, you know that you didn't have a shot.
oh, I mean, unless they're like microseconds, like they are in running.
So, Brazen Nation, we'd love to know what you all think about this. We'd love to encourage you all to think a little bit about the risks you've taken. And if there's any risks you want to take, we want to hear from you about it. So, yes, please email Virginia.
DM me.
We do have a Blue Sky account. So, if you guys want to tag us there, we're there under Brazen Asian.
Oh, we also have IG and threads.
That was the episode. I was your co host, Stella.
And I'm your co host, Virginia. Bye.
Bye.